Good morning, everybody. You are moments away from the start of GoJo Golic. Here's what you have to look forward to on today's show. Lots to get into. We will talk who is trending towards making the college football playoffs and the expanded playoffs. We'll talk about that. Plus, which NFL team do we think are bound to fade? We'll get into that, as well as Heisman hopefuls. Who should be in the mix? Who's the favorite? All that and more. We got some great guests. Jason Fitz going to join us today. It's going to be really fun. Stay tuned.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield. We're presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal, and we got a great show for you. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check the show out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. As Jesse mentioned, a little housekeeping for today. Usually we have Charlotte Wilder for a Wilder Wednesday on a Tuesday. We have a Wilder Wednesday on a Tuesday on a Wednesday this week, and so Jason, Fitz, and her going to flip-flop places. We'll talk a little college football, a little Raiders with our buddy Fitzy off the top of the second hour here. But, Dad, we got to start spreading the news. Everybody on the Giants and Yankees side of New York not waking up and having a great time today, as we will get to the Giants' loss on Monday Night Football to the Steelers. But the Yankees now staring down an 0-3 hole to the Dodgers after Walker Buehler goes out last night and pitches a gem. The Dodgers win 4-2. Now on the cusp of capturing the World Series title, Dad, that we said from the jump this Dodgers team was going to be graded on a pass-fail basis, with this as the only means of showing us that their season and all the money they spent in the offseason was worth it. Well, it looks very much like it, and the name probably not the one we'd expect, as we had all these acquisitions in the offseason, but Freddie Freeman right now, home runs in 5 straight World Series games, going back to his time with the Atlanta Braves, has really stolen the show, gets the Dodgers on the board early, and they never look back here, Dad. It is scary hours for the Yankees officially now.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, they're not coming back from a three love hole. I mean, they're just not. The Dodgers, it's going to pay off all the acquisitions, even though the acquisitions The main acquisition hasn't really done anything in the postseason, somewhat like the Yankees. The two big guys that we were waiting for to get going haven't. You're right. It's been Freddie Freeman. He's hit a home run in each of the first 3 games, matching what Hank Bauer did in 58 and Barry Bonds did in 02 as far as the first 3 games of a home run. You mentioned 5 straight. You go back to 21 when he was with Atlanta and they were in the World Series. And so he has 5 consecutive World Series games with a home run. Really impressive what he's doing on the bad ankle. It's nice that he only has to jog around the bases and not sprint around the bases. But for New York, I mean, we're going to talk about Judge, right? Judge is 1 for 12 in this World Series, 6 for 43 in the postseason, 0 for 3 last night. But he's not getting a lot of help, right? I mean, New York has 30 strikeouts in the World Series. The Dodgers have 17 because Shohei is 1 for 11 in the World Series, but he's getting support from the supporting cast where, Judge is not, just by a couple of people, and is going to need more help. Obviously, they're going to need more help. But again, they're not coming back from a 3-love hole. But this is, while the focus is certainly going to be on Judge and his postseason woes, he hasn't been getting a ton of help from a ton of people in this World Series.
No, he certainly hasn't. And he also went up against a force dad that might just be bigger than him in Walker Buehler, who now improved to 4-4 in 18 career postseason starts. But he's 2-0, including a .5 ERA in 3 World Series outings. He's yielded 1 run, 7 hits, 22 strikeouts over 18 innings, all in Game 3s. Game 3 against Boston in 2018, Game 3 against Tampa in 2020, and now this year against the Yankees. And so Walker Buehler, who we know has been banged up this season and not as available as he'd wanted to be, does Game 3 of the World Series incredibly well. And so now they're in a spot where, Dad, we talked about the history of these 2 teams meeting in the World Series. There's only been one other sweep in the 11 times that these teams have met in the World Series between the Yankees and Dodgers. It happened in 1963. The Yankees haven't been swept in the World Series, period, since 1976. And so, Dad, Game 4 tonight going to be a bullpen game for the Dodgers. Do you think they get it done, or can the Yankees avoid this very dubious bit of history?
Well, it's the old, would you rather celebrate at home? But the Dodgers aren't going to lose the next 2 to go back to L.A. and celebrate in L.A. This is going to be, I think, if I remember correctly, going to be a more of a bullpen starting issue for the Dodgers, who had been kind of living on the bullpen. But they got 3 starts of at least 5 innings, I believe, in the first 3 games of this World Series. So their starters had done a better job. So I could see the Yankees getting 1 of the 2 that are left, but it's going to be over in New York. So whether the Yankees win it tonight and then the Dodgers win the next game, it's going to be over in New York. The Dodgers are going to be celebrating in New York territory.
I need to see right now what Freddie Freeman to hit a home runs prop is tonight. Freddie Freeman is plus 600 to hit a home run tonight. If you're looking, he was plus 800 to hit a home run last night and was the 4th most bet on home run player prop last night. How? I don't know. At this point, if you don't sprinkle a little bit in that to diversify your portfolio on behalf of a man who just can't stop cranking dingers, I don't know what you're doing. I am not a financial advisor. I don't play one on TV. I'm just an idiot who sees the signs that this man is seeing the ball incredibly well right now, and it's got the Dodgers on the cusp of winning the World Series, Dad.
Yeah, and then there was the one play, I know everybody was ripping Giancarlo Stanton for the way he was running the bases. He doubled in the 4th. He's on second. And what was it? Volpe hit a single. And Teoscar Hernandez just from left field. Gunned down Stanton. Everybody was kind of mocking Stanton for the way, he's a big guy. He's not going to be, overly fast. But that throw was so that you couldn't be more on the money with that throw.
Yeah, no, listen, Giancarlo Stanton is more athletic and has been more athletic in his one pinky than I've been in my entire life. He did have the muscle guy run a little bit, but it was so much about the throw. Maybe ill-advised and needed to get a better jump-off rip, but Teoscar Hernandez putting that thing on the button was going to make life difficult for almost anyone there. So just incredible plays all around. The Dodgers' defensive effort far outclassed what the Yankees did. Certainly the offense started sooner at the plate, and it's the reason that they are on the cusp of the World Series. series. So we've got that on one side, which means I'll probably get to hear a bunch of fireworks here in Los Angeles tomorrow night or tonight when this stuff goes off. Dad, we mentioned usually it's the Ets on one side, the Jets and the Mets fans, and then you got the Giants and the Yankees fans on the other side of town. They didn't have much solace in Monday Night Football either last night, as the Giants went out and lost a game that was largely a field goal fest between the two sides here until late in the game. But the Steelers get a 26-18 win. And don't look now, Dad, Russell Wilson, besides that one late turnover, authors another night where the Steelers push the ball downfield in a way that seems heavily encouraging. What'd you like about the Steelers win?
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, you have to like the passing attack, right? Because we thought they would be living on the running with Justin Fields, some passing, but mostly the running attack and defense. And, hey, you have to give Russell Wilson credit for passing the ball. The ball's going downfield more. I know people talked about his deep ball, like a 50-50 ball that's can be more luck than skill by just kind of throwing it up and hoping your receiver comes down with it. But he does throw a nice deep ball, threw a nice deep ball touchdown last night to Calvin Austin, who had two. He had one on a punt return as well. I mean, listen, in the two games that he has started, they put up 37 against the Jets and 36 against the Giants. Now, neither team has a good record, but both teams have a good defense. The Giants went into the night leading the league in sacks and in the top 10 against the pass. Not so much against the run, but against the pass. And Russell Wilson, he threw for 278 last night? I mean, they have the passing game going, because the question's going to be, we all think Baltimore can, even though they had the bad loss to Cleveland, who can compete with Kansas City? That's the question. So now it's 6-2. You have to ask the question, can Pittsburgh compete with Kansas City? You know, now that they definitely have more of a passing game, they certainly have the running game. Najee Harris goes for over 100 yards for the third straight game. So they have the running attack. They have the defense, certainly with the edge rushers. Herbert didn't even play last night. Highsmith was just going around. Chris Hubbard got signed off San Francisco's practice squad. Hubbard came in when you came in the league.
I was going to say, Chris Hubbard is the player that the Pittsburgh Steelers kept instead of me on the practice squad back in 2013, who's made an incredible career for himself as an undrafted free agent out of UAB. But at this point now, pretty long in the tooth and thrown into a situation against a couple of rushers that he certainly knows pretty well or has seen. I mean, I forget if he overlapped with them in Pittsburgh or not, but either way, thrown into a tough situation. Him and Illumor on the other side, who both at different points, Dad, when you look at this game. And I thought Brian Daboll was really candid about this after the game, because there were a couple of critical junctures. TJ Watt, 2 sacks in this game, in the limited instances where they decided to single block him, including a critical third down late in the game that ultimately led to that Daniel Jones strip sack fumble. And Brian Daboll said after the game, as you had Troy Aikman furious on the broadcast pointing out the fact that they single blocked him on such a critical down and distance. They had a tight end to the other side and a running back to his side. Troy Aikman's wondering why he didn't chip. Brian Daboll said after the game, oh no, he was supposed to have help on that play. Daniel Jones was supposed to shift the tight end from left to right over to that side and didn't. Daboll said he felt terrible about that. So one of those spots where, Dad, as so much of this always turns into a referendum on Daniel Jones, and we know fumbles have been an issue for him his entire career. This isn't something new that popped up last night, but his role in protection highlighted there. Now, maybe you could say, hey, that's probably information Brian Daboll shouldn't be giving out about his quarterback, but he also doesn't want to leave his right tackle out to dry in the decision-making that led up to that. And Brian Daboll, let's be frank, trying to probably also have his own back in a situation where he feels his job security less and less, saying, hey, I didn't do this. Like, this was, I gave him the tools to do it. I gave him the tools to protect, and he didn't take them. Does seem like the telltale sign of people who feel the ship going down and are trying to bail water out in the process.
Yeah, listen, the Giants are in trouble. Pittsburgh is not. They have edge rushers. Like I said, Herbert didn't even play as one of the edge rushers. It was Highsmith and Watt, and Highsmith was having a day hitting Jones time after time on this one. And you mentioned T.J. Watt had the strip sack with 3 minutes, because the last score in the game happened with 5 minutes to go. It was 26-18, and the Giants had more chances, but T.J. Watt with the strip sack with 3 minutes to go, and then Beanie Bishop, the rookie, gets another interception with 42 seconds to go to end all the scoring droughts. But, I mean, listen, Pittsburgh is very complimentary football on offense between the run and the pass now. Obviously, the defense is there, but they got the run going and the pass going. I mean, they're a player in the AFC. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Russell Wilson has been looking good.
They're a definite player. And Russell Wilson, now we talked about, had a record for passing yards in a Steelers debut last time. He's now got the franchise record for passing yards in his first 2 outings in a Steelers uniform after last night. And Dad, he looks in control, and I think that's the best thing you could say. There was a situation late in the game even where it was the 3rd down where the Giants had exhausted all their timeouts. The Steelers, if they had gotten a 1st down, would have ended the game. And on that 3rd down, they run the kind of play that you can only run with a veteran quarterback that you trust, which is, hey, we're going to go designed rollout and give you an opportunity. If there's a layup there, you take it. And if not, you got to have the wherewithal to go and just take the sack and meander. And Russell Wilson executed it to perfection. It allowed them to pin the Giants back and make them drive a long field to try and go and tie that game at the very end. And so that, coupled with the emergence of the deep ball, the fact that it's gotten George Pickens in this passing attack and these wide receivers more involved in the game plan, you're right, absolutely stock up in this. All 3 phases. You mentioned offense and defense. Is anyone having a better time than Steelers special teams coach Danny Smith? They showed the footage of him working out shirtless with the boys in the weight room in the offseason. Like, they love that dude, and we talked about it yesterday, has invested in them back. The one place I'll poke a hole in the Steelers after last night, Dad, and say, what the hell happened to the rush defense? 2nd in the NFL in EPA per rush on defense, behind only the Minnesota Vikings, sandwiched between them and the Chiefs, and you give up 157 yards rushing, including 145 yards on the ground to Tyrone Lacey, who wasn't even supposed to be there.
Yeah. Tyrone Lacey had a 45-yard touchdown run to make it a one-score game, 23-15. They'd missed the 2-point conversion on that one. But yeah, that was the one kind of kink in the armor, as they did give up the run. But you're right about Danny Smith. Is there a more beloved assistant coach in the league than Danny Smith? I mean, the players just absolutely love that guy. Calvin Austin with a 73-yard punt return. That was the first touchdown of the game. It was a field goal fest in the first half. 3 field goals for each team, 9-9, until you got the punt return for a touchdown. There were 3 touchdowns called back, nullified by penalties. I mean, so that was a 2 by Pittsburgh. So it was kind of an ugly penalty game. Now there were 16 total penalties, but the Giants had 11 of them. I mean, but the flags were flying last night.
And I think that's part of the takeaway for the Giants is the Steelers feel like contenders because the passing attack has started to match the rest of a team that's productive in other phases. And again, we talked about the Ravens' flaws on the back end. So now you're building yourself to be able to exploit that and get out of your own division. On the other side with the Giants, it was undisciplined play like we talked about, illegal formations, nullifying touchdowns, all of the pre-snap penalties and things that popped up for them. And then, Dad, everyone's going to talk about the 2-point play from the Giants last night, a team who we know have a litany of problems on there, finally injured on the offensive line. They had to bench Deonte Banks in the middle of the game last night after his effort got questioned in the game prior, as it seems like that continues to go south. But they were, Dad, down 14 points in the 4th quarter. They scored the touchdown, and this is the analytics question all the time. Do you go for 2 in that spot, knowing that increases your likelihood of winning the game, because all you've got to do is go for 2 and get it once in order to put yourself in a position to win the game by 1 instead of just tying and sending to overtime. So it increases your chance of winning the game in regulation, saying that the going for it on 2 is basically a 50-50 split, and that making that once out of 2 is easier than making both field goals. But in this case, it's also always about the play. I had no problem with them going for 2 when you're down 14 and score. I love that decision. Try and win games instead of just holding on to try and tie them. But once again, it's what's the play call and then how's the execution? They go the swinging gate where it's Daniel Jones and 2 people in front of him with 4 offensive linemen and a running back and then a receiver behind them on one side. So you've got 5 blockers against 3 defenders on the outside there. But Daniel Jones throws the ball before everybody's ready to Malik Neighbors, and all of a sudden, I forget if it was Alex Highsmith, sneaks through and makes the play in the backfield for a loss, and everyone's yelling at each other when it's, hey, if everyone's just ready for the snap, even if I think this kind of trick dick and play isn't exactly what I love in that spot, if everyone's just ready at the snap, it's 5-on-3. It's probably a walk-in there. So you're going to hear a lot of people blame analytics for what was just a play call discrepancy in this situation, in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, obviously it's kind of a non-conforming play, but that you work on it, right? You work on it, and you expect to execute it, and it's one of the. It's kind of like when Saquon Barkley dropped that third down out route. People questioned, well, what going for it or whatever, but the play would have worked. This play probably would have worked if it were executed correctly, but it wasn't, and it didn't. So. The Giants still have problems scoring just 18 points in this game. Pittsburgh has a bye, so they get to just kind of take a breath and chill. And the Giants take on the division-leading Washington Commanders next. So it doesn't get much easier for New York.
No, the road to go through the NFC East decidedly more difficult now that the machine is finally online in our nation's capital. And Mike Tomlin gets to smile and wink into the camera heading into the bye week, knowing that he has pushed all the right buttons so far as the outside world sat there and questioned his decisions around the quarterback position on his team. Mike Tomlin gets to slap the side of this thing and say, I know my car. We're not going to run out of gas, and we're going to be good to go. Coming up next, let's head to college. A couple of coaches sounding off at the microphone after big wins this last weekend. Next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. Guys, the first college football playoff rankings come out a week from tonight. I'm sure there's going to be no other voting processes. It's going to be news that day, right? Just this. So let's do some early polling for the college football playoff. Let's get into it just in case there's other stuff that might overshadow it. So returns so far looking good for Texas A&M. Here's Mike Elko after a huge win against LSU this weekend.
We're very honest, we're very open, and this is a real program. It's not fake. It's not a politician running this program, talking fast and BSing everybody. This is a real program. And for all the recruits out there, this is a real place. And if you want to be really good at football, this is a really good place to be.
Okay, we get it. It's real.
Man.
It's real. You're real. We believe you.
Like, is that real shade? Like, the question on everybody's mind is, was he shading A, former Texas A&M head coach Jimbo Fisher, who does sound like an auctioneer and would fit some of that description, at least stylistically. B, Brian Kelly, the coach across the sideline, another coach that he was a defensive coordinator for, who they just faced that night. Or C, none of the above. Do you actually believe Mike Elko, who came out and explained later that this was about no one in particular, but rather just stating what their program is about there in College Station, Dad? Which one of those are you buying?
I believe that it was directed at somebody. I believe it just sounded too specific to not be directed at somebody. So I am going to go with that.
It sounds like Jimbo a little bit in terms of talking fast and the fact that I'm sure that's something that he's had to overcome in the early going here at Texas A&M is the association that program did have with Jimbo Fisher. Now, I will say, having covered Mike Elko and gotten to chat with him a little bit, he was the coordinator at Notre Dame for some time as well. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would just be openly taking shots at other people. He is as football guy as it gets, and it's why, Dad, I think this Texas A&M program was always in position to come online a lot faster than people anticipated. Said so before the year, and that win for Notre Dame aging like fine wine, because when you look at this team, and especially when they made the switch to Marcel Reed at the end of in the second half, it was a different football team to go along with a defense comprised mostly of space aliens who I would never want to see one-on-one at the line of scrimmage. It turned them into a team that was a buzzsaw in the second half, and now absolutely down this home stretch where they've still got some tough competition to face. They're absolutely a player in the college football playoff race right now, Dad. They're first in the SEC standings because they're undefeated in conference. They're only lost 2 out of conference, Notre Dame, but it's a team that, when they've got the threat of quarterback run and Colin Klein, their offensive coordinator, gets to realize his full form and call plays with design quarterback runs in mind, they're an entirely different outfit. And I don't know how, at this point, you could justify putting Connor Wegman back out there.
So going back quickly to Elko and his comment, he actually made a comment about his politician comment, saying that it's just comical that I actually have to do this, but it's necessary. He said, I was asked to kind of give a synopsis on how we sell culture to our program. In doing so, I made a statement that seemed to be a very benign statement that somehow managed to be taken as a shot directly at people. He said, you guys gave me multiple opportunities in 9 months to take shots at people, and I've never done it. So he goes on to say it wasn't against anybody. And listen, we're all guessing here. Maybe it wasn't, because you're right. Elko's a great dude. He is a great dude, very respected coach. So maybe it was as simple as kind of talking up the culture of this program. That being said, you're right. I don't know how you can go back to Wegman. Marcel Reed, what he did, completed just 2 passes, but 9 carries, 62, 67 yards right in that area there, 3 touchdowns, just opened up this offense. It was night and day against LSU. So I'm with you. I don't know how you go back to Connor Wegman, who wasn't real happy to be getting benched, that's for sure, and nobody should be. Right, quite honestly, nobody should be. But this team, you know, Notre Dame got him in the opening game of the season, and it was a heck of a game, and it looks great on Notre Dame's resume. And Texas A&M, you know, win out, and they're obviously going to be in the SEC championship game, lose to Texas, and if Georgia and Texas win out, that's going to be Georgia and Texas in the SEC title game.
Right now, in terms of strength of resume, which, as you get ready, as we prepare you guys for next week, where the Tuesday rankings come out for the CFP committee for the first time, and we're going to learn a lot. Like, we're going to talk a little bit about bubble teams today, Dad, but I talked with Jess Matana about this yesterday. We don't know what the committee is going to value for teams 5 through 12, 5 through 14, in the ways that in previous years, there was a pretty steady rubric of the things that got you out of the 4-team playoff race. But one of the things I expect to carry over is when the committee gets in that room to talk about this, they use a bunch of different metrics on the screen to compare the two teams from a statistical standpoint. One of those is strength of resume. It's on ESPN.com. You can go find it under the rankings tab. It's what's the likelihood that an average team could go out and play your schedule and accomplish the same record. And right now, that's one of the things that almost always coincides with what the top four ends up looking like. It's pretty much near the top of that strength of resume record. And right now, Texas A&M is sitting there ranked 7th in strength of resume. So this is a team who, after that Notre Dame loss, the committee, the very human committee, can also sell and say, hey, listen, this team got better after that loss. And I think clearly with Marcel Reed, we saw half to half. I mean, the Alabama-Georgia game felt like 2 games in one, Dad. This game felt like truly 2 different planets. Now, a quarterback change goes a long way in that, but LSU's defense, and Brian Kelly mentioned it after the game, just seemed to have no earthly idea how to handle quarterback run in the second half. Eye violations all over the place, wide open rushing lanes either for Reed or the other guys in that backfield. It helped everyone else be better at their jobs in an offense that didn't even really need to threaten them with the pass. And so all of those things the committee can wrap up and say, yeah, this is a different football team right now. And so we can feel pretty comfortable saying they've done what we asked after an early season blemish and probably have them well inside the dance right now.
Yeah. Oh, I think so as well. Now, if they were to lose to Texas, they wouldn't be, and Texas wins out and Georgia wins out. It's Texas, as I said, Texas and Georgia in the SEC title game. But we know there's going to be a 2-loss team in the top 12, right? If you had 2 losses, you were out when it was just 4 teams. 2-loss team's going to get in. Which 2-loss team could it be? If A&M would lose to Texas, their 2 losses would be to Notre Dame, which if Notre Dame wins out is going to most likely be in this thing, and to Texas, who would be representing in the SEC title game and looking for a top 4 seed. So those would be 2 really good losses for Texas A&M. But you're right, that initial ranking by the committee is huge on where they place you, how close you are to the cliff of falling out of the top 12, and how secure you are closer to the top 5 than the 11 and 12.
Yeah, the AP rankings have no bearing on the committee's rankings, and the committee's rankings are supposed to be drawn up anew week to week. We know human nature means that's probably not real.
Right.
But either way, Texas A&M now firmly in the mix after this weekend. They still have a tough road. South Carolina coming up this weekend off a bye after that close loss, or a win coming off that close loss to Alabama. Lenora Sellers is a roller coaster ride. That defense is lethal. We know they play Beamer ball, so can't take your eyes off the prize there by any stretch of the imagination. But the Aggies have been one to keep an eye on, and are certainly firmly in the mix now. Jesse, let's go over to the ACC, where another coach was talking his talk after a big rival. I guess it's a rivalry game win between Miami and Florida State.
Yeah, so first of all, really quick, ACC does have like a lot of scenarios here of what could happen. So Clemson or SMU winning in the championship game over Miami would cause a lot of chaos. But like you said, Miami looks like they could win out, and their head coach had some things to say, okay? They're the preeminent program in Florida. Everybody knows this. Just ask Mario Cristobal.
All recruits, in-state, out-of-state, can now clearly see the trajectory of this program versus the trajectory of the other programs.
It was the for me.
Wow.
Okay.
Sassy.
Did you see
We got a
that?
sassy little table punch
Yeah,
from Mario.
like, oh God,
wow.
what did the table do to you? But yeah, he was making his point.
I mean, and Miami's been making the point in the recruiting trail for a while now. That hasn't been Mario's issue since he's come over here. It's been some of the in-game management that popped up last year. But, Dad, they've been bullies on the recruiting front quite literally. You remember the Florida game where they embarrassed the Gators in the beginning of the season, and Miami players were walking over to Florida's recruits, much to the dismay of the poor recruiting staffers, trying in vain to stop it from happening, basically dog-cussing the Gators and telling their recruits to come on over to Miami. And Dad, what Jesse mentioned with the ACC scenarios is interesting, because Miami, after that hot start's been living on the edge for a while now. Now, this Florida State game wasn't the case, which we know Florida State, that's more of an indictment of them. But now we do have some other teams that are legitimately interested, including Clemson, who they're probably the team I am most interested to see the committee's reaction to after this initial ranking, because of the trajectory their season's been on since we left them for dead early on. So, Dad, as you look at the ACC, how confident are you in Miami to be able to hold serve and continue what should be a run to the playoff?
Certainly shaky in a couple of games, but the schedule favors them, right? I mean, they don't play the other. There are 4 teams undefeated in the conference: Clemson, Miami, SMU, and Pittsburgh. And Miami doesn't play Clemson, SMU, or Pittsburgh. Clemson plays Pitt. SMU plays Pitt. So Pitt plays them both. Miami has Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Syracuse. So their schedule is the easiest of the remaining undefeated teams in the ACC. So their road should be the smoothest to the title game, and I think it's going to be against Clemson. Listen, I thought, like in the NFL, I thought Dallas would take a step back. In the college, I thought Clemson would take a step back. But the offense has really stepped up. You knew they always had a tough defense, but the offense has definitely stepped up, and they're playing some good ball. I think we're heading to a Clemson-Miami ACC title game.
Yeah, I would probably agree at this point, especially because as we look at some of the other teams around there, Jesse mentioned SMU, who's been off to a hot start. We talked to Rhett Lashley a while ago on this program. That team already down their best player, you could argue, on offense in tight end RJ Maryland, who was lost for the season to a knee injury, unfortunately, a guy with major NFL prospects who's been really, really productive for them, their leading receiver at tight end. And then on the other side, Dad, going into that matchup against Pitt this weekend, that's still undefeated, that's been running fast, effective offense to go along with a defense that's the usual standard there. Now we're not sure if quarterback Eli Holstein's going to be able to go this weekend against SMU. Left in the fourth quarter of last week with an injury in their win over Syracuse. And so for both of these teams, health might be the factor that ultimately determines a lot of the outcomes for those two teams that showed a lot of promise, especially SMU in their first year in the ACC. And there's little old Clemson, as Dabo would like to say, just hold and serve, doing their thing, minding their own business while they wait to try and wind up where they always do, it seems, in the college football playoff. Would be an amazing turn of events considering the entire offseason conversation around Dabo. And listen, it was a conversation we participated in. It's a conversation that I agree with is, hey, making use of the resources at your disposal is just smart business when it comes to team building. And Dabo's forsaken that in favor of the loyalty that has defined his program. And so far for him, kind of like we talked about with Mike Tomlin, pushing all the right buttons with his team, so far for Dabo, it seems to be working for him outside of that Georgia game.
Yeah, he may be getting the last laugh at this. As we all said, it was like a dinosaur. You have to get to the now, adapt or die, get into the way the game is played now. And he is just not doing it, or certainly not doing it at the rate that other teams are doing it. And you're right. He gets in the ACC title game, and God forbid he win that thing. That is definitely the last laugh. If he were in the top 4 seed of the first year of the 12-team playoff, I still think Miami's a better team, but boy, Miami has cut a couple of games really, really close. The defense is giving up points, and the Clemson offense is playing much, much better. So while, again, there are 4 undefeateds, I do think it comes down to Clemson and Miami.
I would agree. All roads seem to lead to that, which is box office for us. More of what college football wants in 2024. We will get to a look at the bigs, the Big Ten, and a very chaotic Big 12 to go along with some Heisman race talk coming up with our buddy Jason Fitz off the top of the next hour, who you can catch covering college football over at Yahoo Sports. We'll also ask him for a nice unbiased view of our Notre Dame Fighting Irish, because after this weekend, I think I'm ready to get hurt again. I think after the Notre Dame Navy win, I'm finally back at a point where I've seen this team play enough quality football now. Actually, forget wins, play quality football where I'm ready to believe that if they run the table, they are not only deserving of, but capable of going and being a playoff team based on the way that that team has improved this season. Coming up next, we'll talk about some NFL bubble teams, a little contender or pretender after we shout out some grade A top choice beef here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic, and I have but one question for you, and that is where's the beef? Right here on GoJo and Golic, okay? Because it's time to name the offensive lineman of the week, presented by Campbell's Chunky. Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal. And GoJo, I mean, I know you had an easy one for this week, buddy.
Man, let me tell you what, there are very few moments, because I didn't play football nearly as long as my dad, and it's a big part of my identity, but it's one that I left in the rearview mirror a lot earlier in my life. This moment made the old lineman in me well up with rage and then with pride watching what played out in the Saints-Chargers game. Because if you looked at that game, at one point Justin Herbert got sacked in that game on the ground, and Saints D-tackle Nathan Shepard's there, just gator rolling away at Justin Herbert's ankles in a way that you saw Justin Herbert start to twist and fall, looked like it was going to get nasty, and here comes big Bradley Bozeman just prying him off there, gets the unnecessary roughness flag, and Dad, I can assure you that roughness was necessary, because there's a few things you just don't do, and touch the merchandise like that well after the whistle, real high up on the list, might be number 1 or 2. Bradley Bozeman gets down there, absolutely annihilates him, and then gets up to what I'd imagine is say only the worst things in the entire world, 4 inches from his face on the ground, as he basically chokes him out there underneath him. That's the standard. If you're a young lineman or a football player anywhere, that's the standard right now. When people are going after your boy, that is the only way to respond right there. You take that flag 10 times out of 10 to go set the tone in a game where you understand that guy, yeah, even before he's highly paid at any level of football, holds your hopes and dreams in his hand. More than anything, he's your boy, and you never let that happen. It was a ridiculous play by the defender, and Bradley Bozeman did the absolute right thing, washing his face in the turf.
Well, I knew you would like that a lot. I mean, he picked him off of Herbert, man. And then you're right, looked like he was absolutely choking him out. Herbert was pulling him off. The ref was trying to pull him off. Herbert trying to say, calm down. Listen, I don't know if there's ever a good time for a flag. There's better times than others to get a flag, but you have to, and even Bozeman said after the game, he said, that's my quarterback. I'm going to protect my quarterback without question. But it brought back memories. I actually did that one time to a player. I was trying to choke him out. I was with the Eagles, and Jeff Eagles, obviously my teammate and very good friend of mine, was punting. So we were going out on the field. He was punting to the other team, and we were getting ready to go out in the field. And this was back in the day when you could, you go for $100 hit, you go for a punter, you go for a long snapper, and, you didn't get flagged for it. You could blindside hit, all that stuff. So Feegs punted the ball.
My dad says $100 hit. That means for that hit, you would be rewarded for $100 in the meeting room. You guys were Bountygate before Bountygate was cool.
Yeah, you'd get $100 for a big hit. They'd call you up, everybody would cheer, they hand you a $100 bill. But in this game, Feagles punted and was running down the field, and I think it was a linebacker or something, or DB, somebody just cleaned him. And Feegs tried to get up and the dude just kept cleaning him back again. When it was legal, you could just keep pile driving him into the ground. So the return kind of came back in the area of Feegs, and I was going on the field as a defense, and I saw that, and I veered off, and I picked the guy off of Feagles, who just kind of like Bozeman did, and I swear I was choking him out. I wanted to choke him out. I mean, I was just enraged at this dude doing it, and it just brought back memories when Bozeman did it. I'm like, yeah, you got to teach him. You got to show him, man. And you know what? The biggest difference, no flags. There was no flags. There was no flags on the dude that was cleaning up Feegs, and there was no flag by me picking that dude off of Feegs. It was just play on, separate and play on.
Yep, you guys were going to dispense that martial law on the field and take care of it all yourselves. In this case, Bradley Bozeman, both of you guys, basically like Ralphie snapping in A Christmas Story, just beating the ever-loving hell out of the bully there until he taps out. So congratulations to Bradley Bozeman. He is our Campbell's Chunky Offensive Lineman of the Week for going out there and having his quarterbacks back all the way through the echo of the whistle. Love that from you, Bradley. And Jesse, we needed to celebrate that because unfortunately the rest of the weekend did not necessarily feature large excellence in the ways that I like it here. We'll get to that in a second. Dad, I guess for the Chargers briefly, though, before we move on the way I was going to there, looking at this team, they get a big win against the Saints. They've kind of been hovering in the middle of interesting territory. We know the AFC West belongs to the Chiefs until further notice. The Broncos' pass defense is having a year opposite a rookie quarterback. Where are you at? I know you were as skeptical about this Chargers team coming into the season as anybody, wondering how much they were going to be able to do, sans the weapons that they don't have on this team. What have you made of the Chargers so far? And is there any part of them that down the stretch, maybe with the right move before the trade deadline, that could look like someone that's actually a playoff contender?
Oh, absolutely, Mike. I mean, we have, at least I'll say I have been wrong on the Chargers. Now, the offense isn't the high-flying offense that we're used to with the offensive weapons they had. But quite honestly, that defense has been a top 10 defense. The defense has been playing incredibly well. And that's one of the reasons, when they lose, they're even losing close games. But right now, you sit there and look at the West, they have 3 losses in the Broncos. Again, the 3 starting rookie quarterbacks who started from week 1 all have 500 or better than 500 records. And Denver being one of them with Bo Nix, they have 3 losses. The Chargers have 3 losses. You look at the other divisions, second place in the East, Miami has 5 losses. Baltimore does have 3 losses. Second place in the South is the Colts at 4 losses. I mean, the Chargers are right there right now. So credit to Jim Harbaugh on what he's building. Again, the offense isn't as prolific as it was, but the defense is certainly playing some ball. So, yeah, they could absolutely make a run.
They've already got a win head-to-head against the Broncos on the season in the division, which is going to become important there. And, Dad, I'm with you. The defense, 5th in EPA per play on that side of the ball, 20th on offense. They've been dedicated to the run, but not really that good at it with J.K. Dobbins in that backfield. Right. But I will bet on that team the way Justin Herbert is playing football right now with basically no major weapons to throw to and still putting some really incredible stuff on tape. So I'm with you. I think they're contender light. I don't expect much of them when they get there. I think they're a year away.
Right.
But the thing they know for sure, Jesse Minter coming over on defense. Hey, you might be already a bit frustrated with the Greg Roman experience on offense. You may have disagreed with their decision-making in the draft to go Joe Alt over some of the weapons available at the top. But Jesse Minter and what he's done immediately injecting life into a defense that this time last year really struggled. And remember, Dad, this offseason they had the choice of were they going to keep them some weapons around on offense, Keenan Allen goes to the Chicago Bears, or were they going to re-sign at a lower price or bring back at a lower price Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack on defense? And their decision to skew defense combining with Jesse Minter has certainly paid dividends on that side of the ball. That's a far cry from where they were at the end of the Brandon Staley era. So progress being made there, Jesse, as I was about to get to, though, progress lost in the thick 6 movement, unfortunately, in the Bears game this weekend that I feel like we need to address.
Yeah, the movement was set back a few years, after the Bears goal line handoff led to that fumble recovered by the Commanders. You hate to see it. We talked about the Hail Mary, of course, but just devastating loss for the Bears here. Are we going to look back on this loss, on this moment, as being the reason that the Bears don't make the playoffs?
I don't think it's going to be this loss, Dad. I think it's in conjunction with what we saw really from 3 quarters with them, which is still an incomplete sample size or grade on offense. A group that's made a lot of progress, but remember, did so against a really easy patch of their schedule where Caleb Williams was able to start to see the ball go through the basket a little bit right now. I think coming down the home stretch of the season where the schedule gets decidedly tougher for them, that all of a sudden we're going to be talking about a team that, hey, I think is still going to make progress. And with Caleb Williams, I said, even in a game last week against the Commanders where I didn't think he played great for the lion's share of the game, I still think you saw moments where he was more comfortable as the playmaker you're eventually going to need him to be, even if he's not Jaden Daniels level of competent right now. So I'll say I feel the exact same about them now as I did at the start of the season.
Which is what? Not a playoff team, correct?
Yeah, which is not a playoff team right now. Through the first half of the season, Dad, they had according to FTN, they had the 31st ranked strength of schedule going into, or the first portion of the season here. They had the second easiest schedule in the NFL. Down the home stretch, they have the hardest ranked schedule the rest of the season. So based off what we've seen, I just don't think they're going to be able to hold up against that.
And the defense, we talked about the defense carrying, a rookie quarterback. The defense has been good, not great, right? They've been basically a top 10 defense, so good, but the expectation was for them to be bordering on the great part, and they haven't. But still a extremely good defense. Caleb Williams now he's progressing in the right way, but he's still showing inconsistencies of a rookie quarterback. Both are the three. Jaden Daniels showing the most poise for sure. Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, you see some good, you see some bad. It's still kind of a crapshoot with Caleb Williams. You see him escape and go, wow, and then you see, a bad play off of that or an errant throw off of that. So I do think he is getting to be the quarterback they want him to be. He is a rookie. Again, let me just say, I'm not saying a bust here at all. I'm just saying still inconsistent, which is the norm for a rookie. Again, C.J. Stroud last year was the exception, not the rule for a rookie quarterback. Jaden Daniels, is certainly starting out, was the exception, not the rule for a rookie quarterback. But owners see that, and they expect that. They expect the rookie to step in and play well. And Caleb has at times. Don't get me wrong. He absolutely has looked spectacular at times, but then at times he hasn't. And that's when you need the running game and the defense to step up and pick up.
Yeah, and to be clear, they got a big game out of DeAndre Swift this past weekend. But overall, Dad, I think as we look at the rookies, Jaden Daniels obviously in a class of his own. I'll ask the same question about the Washington Commanders if we believe they're contenders, and I absolutely think, based on the improvement, quite honestly, that we've seen from the defense and the offensive line as much as anything this season, I would say they are legitimate contenders right now. Currently second in the odds to win the NFC East behind the Philadelphia Eagles, who are at minus money now that all of their weapons are back. And I think that's going to be a close one, Dad. The Eagles have been banged up intermittently on the offensive line and still trying to get healthy there. Fred Johnson did a better job protecting on that left side in place of Jordan Mailata this last week, but there's enough areas to where an improved Washington defense might have a shot, and offensively, they can go out there and play ball against anybody, including this Philadelphia team that's still breaking in some new players in the secondary, even though Cooper DeJean looks really good so far.
The Washington team now, the improvement in defense isn't as shocking to me because Dan Quinn's a head coach and he's a defensive coach and he really specified that part of the ball, and they're playing well on defense. It's the O-line. The O-line added some pieces, and we talked about other O-lines, taking time to build chemistry. I thought this O-line was going to be a negative for this team, and they have really outperformed, I think, a lot of people's thoughts in how well they're playing, especially in front of a rookie quarterback. So they're definitely contenders because, Philly looks like they may be getting into their groove. The health of both those receivers is key. Goddard was nicked up, but to get him back will be key. Saquon Barkley was a monster pickup. He's running the ball well. So I do think it'll be a battle between those two teams, but I think those two teams can both be in the playoffs.
In terms of EPA per rush, the Washington Commanders are the best running team in football. Yards before contact per attempt, the stat that we talk about, is equal parts offensive line and also the quarterback's influence on the run game. They're second behind only the Baltimore freaking Ravens that went out and brought Derrick Henry to pay over with the two-time MVP. So the territory they're in right now for that run game is going to continue to pay dividends provided their quarterback can stay healthy. And I think, Dad, that's the one bit of doubt you can invite after last week where we saw Jaden Daniels go down with that rib injury. Now, he came back and played this week, didn't look to be hampered by that much, and it didn't appear to affect his game. But that is the thing that everyone's going to keep an eye out now because he was hit in the open field while running, and that's something we expect to see more of if Jaden Daniels and the Commanders are going to go and accomplish the things that we think they're capable of as a legitimate playoff team based on the way they've played through the first half of the season. So plenty more to get to with them. I want to talk at some point today. Maybe we can do this with Fitz too. We're really putting a lot of pressure on this man with some of the things that we want to get to. One team we didn't talk about coming off this weekend, the Arizona Cardinals, played the Miami Dolphins. Tua Tagovailoa got back out on the football field after going on injured reserve with a scary concussion that he suffered, another one in his career that left him on the ground and left all of us asking questions about his future. And I got to say, after seeing him on the field, if he wants to keep playing football, his future is in zero doubt based on his performance. We can get to that more next year on GoJo and Golic.
All right, things are getting late early for the Yankees. Freddie Freeman hits another home run in Game 3. Dodgers are up 3-0 in the series. Walker Buehler went 5 scoreless innings for the win. Game 4 tonight. Yankees are favored to keep the series alive, win or lose. We're going to talk to Kevin Millar tomorrow. He knows a thing or two about 3-0 comebacks. Yes, he does. And coming up next on GoJo and Golic, we will keep things exciting as we welcome in Jason Fitz. He will join the program to talk everything NFL, all that and more coming up in hour 2 of GoJo and Golic, so stay tuned.
All right, hour number 2 here on GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and as we mentioned, a little scheduling change up today. Jason Fitz, who you can check out hosting over at Yahoo Sports. He's on Inside Coverage as well as the College Football Power Hour, joining us on a Tuesday instead of his usual Wednesday. Fitzy, what's going on, man?
And just living the dream. Happy to be with you guys on a Tuesday. Feels good. Let's go.
Dear God. Okay, just calm down a little bit, man.
I've had a little bit of coffee.
coffee.
I get one cup of coffee today, like a day, and I'm about halfway through it. Mike, you're getting me. I've already taken part of my pre-workout. I'm headed to the gym right after this. You are getting the most amped up version of me that exists. Come on.
No, that is not true, because what I have to explain to people now is this is Jason Fitz off one cup of coffee. When I first met Jason, the first show we ever worked on, College Football Mondays on ESPNU down in Charlotte, North Carolina, I walked into the studio, and on the desk in front of Jason were 2 Tall Boy Monster energy drinks with 2 5-hour energy drinks on top of them, almost like he was getting ready to drop them in and drink them like a Jaeger bomb, and he drank them all in the 15 minutes before we went on air, to which I responded to him, having just met him, dude, just do drugs. It would be a lot quicker, and I'd imagine cheaper than this, depending on where you get them from. So this is not the most hopped up I've ever seen you by far.
The only thing I'd say is that, on my fitness path, I had to give up caffeine for a long time. So now I'm back to getting 1 cup of coffee a day. When you haven't had any caffeine for 4 or 5 months, 1 cup of coffee a day, I'll do it for you, man. Like, it's amazing how 1 cup gives me, I figured it out. Like, who knew moderation was actually a thing? I can't sustain it, but we'll see.
All right,
I
a nice
couldn't do 1
factory
cup a day.
reset. No.
Could not do 1 cup a day. I do 3 cups during this show alone, let alone 1 cup a day. Oh, he's got the pinky.
That's what it takes for
That
Dad to
boy.
put up with me for 2 hours in the morning. So he's got to try and do whatever he has to get through that, as you both have experienced here. But, Jason, if we're talking about what seems like a reset here, let's talk about that in terms of the NFL. Dad and I were just talking in the last segment about Tua Tagovailoa, who made his return to football this weekend against the Arizona Cardinals, coming off being on IR for concussion. He had said he had been symptom-free since the day after his very scary concussion in game weeks ago. What did you make of his performance in his first outing back against that Cardinals team?
It was actually better than I expected. I thought it was going to be particularly rusty. Let's be real here. The Dolphins are not sort of the juggernaut I think most of us thought we could be. And frankly, if you're a Miami fan, you're pretty disappointed that you got Tua back and you still found a way to lose that football game. But Tua, I thought, played pretty well. And look, we've made a lot about the fact that he gave himself up on a couple of runs. I think that's probably the smart thing to do. At some point, we just got to expect that Miami's going to get better over the next month. But Mike, at this point, also, we have to acknowledge they're so far back in the division. It's just, what are you fighting for? So there's a fine line on all of this. I don't think Miami's going to fight their way back into the playoff conversation, but I thought Tua looked okay.
Yeah, Dad, you look at all the numbers jumped offensively for them. They had averaged 274.5 yards per game in the 4 games without him, 377 on Sunday. Pass yards jumped from 136.5 a game without him to 227 this weekend against the Cardinals. And even the rushing numbers got better, Dad. He operated that offense to perfection, the way that we had been used to. It looked like the normal stuff, and highlighted, I think, after what we saw from Mike McDaniel, just how important Tua and his skill set are to making that offense clearly be able to function at a level that gives them a chance.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't turn the no interceptions. Did fumble 3 times, but no interceptions. And listen, 27 points should be enough to win a game. The defense gave up 28, unfortunately, to the Cardinals on a last-second field goal by Chad Ryland. So I thought he obviously – listen, they seem unprepared without him, with the backup quarterbacks in that system that fall off. Now, normally there is a fall off with a back off, but the fall off was a huge crevice. So with him back, this offense obviously is meant for him and runs a hell of a lot smoother with him. And again, as I'll say, nobody should tell the man to retire or what he should do with his career. He's a grown-ass man who can decide what he wants to do with his career. Between him and his family, he wants to play, let him play.
Mike, that's such an important point, because I talked to Talia, his brother, a couple of years ago when all of this was going down for a college football thing. And I asked him about how rough it must be. And one thing that he stressed is that Tua sat down with his family and with his personal doctor. And I keep saying this to everybody. I'm not talking about a team-affiliated doctor. I'm talking about you sat down with your personal doctor. Last time I checked, your personal doctor probably knows more about your health than anybody on Twitter does. So maybe we should all step back a little bit and realize that while he obviously has a very visceral reaction to what concussions cause to his body that is jarring for us to see, if the people in charge of his care that are not affiliated with the team, that just know him and his family, say he can play, he can play. And Mike, you make a good point too about the way this offense looked, because in the beginning of the season, it didn't look great, but we got to remember that it's essentially preseason, right? So for all the conversation about Tua and he needs his weapons, and then all the conversation about Tua and the offense wasn't good enough early in the season, I think what we saw yesterday is that the offense is good enough. Tua is part of what makes all of this click. Maybe we should change some of the narrative around Tua. And if the guy wants to play, and that's up to him, that's between his doctor, his family, his God. That's not for us to decide.
And we saw him come back. Now, it will be the question down the stretch of this season as we talk about, can you think about them as anything other than a team that's just going to be holding water till next year? Because we don't know what hit could be the next one that unfortunately triggers something like that for Tua based off what we've seen in the past. But he gives them a much better chance on offense. Defensively, I think some of their numbers were probably a little bit exaggerated based on game flow. You saw, gave up 100 yards to two different receivers in Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. Kyler Murray looked awesome and took over at the end of this game. And so the Dolphins are going to be an interesting out, but it was good to see Tua back out there if that's what he truly wanted. And there's no doubt he made that offense and that entire team worlds better. Fitz, we always get to kind of dip a toe into both worlds with you here when we've got you. So I wanted to get some college football in, especially because we haven't talked about Notre Dame from this weekend yet as it pertains to the college football playoff race. That I don't always love reducing everything to the playoff early in the season, but we're a week away from the first round of CFP rankings. We're coming down the final stretch of the season. This feels like the appropriate time. And I said to my dad, after watching Notre Dame in a game where no doubt 6 turnovers by Navy is going to skew this thing in a way that's almost incomprehensible, but sifting through that to watch the football, that especially this Notre Dame offense led by Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love in that backfield have been playing as of late. I'm ready to get hurt again as a Notre Dame fan. I believe that they've made actual progress on offense, which makes sense given the fact that Riley Leonard wasn't available to them in the spring, and this is a totally new group of receivers and largely new group of offensive linemen in front of him. As someone that's a third party, an unbiased viewer who does not have any sort of Notre Dame beating in their chest, what do you see when you watch this football team right now?
I thought it was a necessary statement win for the College Football Committee to look at. And Mike, they out-serviced the service academies. It felt to me like from the outset, Notre Dame had heard all the noise about what Navy's offense was going to be able to do, and they just decided to do the same thing. They out-physicaled them at the line of scrimmage. They outran them. They did everything you could possibly ask them to do. They did it in a big, big way. To the point, this is what I always say, when you look at a top 25 win, if suddenly the entire conversation around the loser changes, you know that was a butt whooping. So all of a sudden, after the Navy game, it was like, well, Navy really hasn't played anybody, right? Like that was the first thing to happen. We started to qualify Navy. That's how big of a thrashing that was. I think that's important because Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of runway, and they do have an inexcusable loss on their schedule. And when you start talking about some of these other teams, especially some of the big conference teams that are going to be vying, one loss, big conference teams are going to be vying for those playoff spots, they're going to have a better loss. We know how much the committee values that. They will have a better loss than Notre Dame does. So it's important in my mind that Notre Dame go out and without question absolutely dominate the remaining ranked opponents that they have. They did that. You got to tip their cap to it.
Listen, to me, Notre Dame, if they win out, they're in. It's just a matter of if the committee gives them or puts them in a position to have a home game, right? 5 through 8. Right now they're sitting at 8 in the AP, but we know the AP doesn't go into consideration for the committee. And you're right, the loss is a bad loss. Northern Illinois, I think, has 4 losses now on the year. So all the one-loss teams, for the most part, are going to be better losses than Notre Dame's loss. And play Florida State, Virginia, Army, and SC. And Fitz, I can already see if they were to run the table and in that case beat Army, that will be said as well. Well, Army hasn't played anybody, like Navy hasn't played anybody. Army's sitting there ranked 21st right now, and that will be said about it. And to a point, I get it. I understand that the schedule Army plays compared to what the Power Fours are playing. I do understand that. But to me, it's if Notre Dame runs the table, they'll be in. It's just a matter of, Mike, if they have a home game or not.
Yeah, it would be. I think as Fitz, I see you hemming and hawing there a little bit. Is it the 2-loss SEC team sitting in the back of your mind? Do you think the ACC or the Big 12 are capable of getting multiple teams in at this point? What's hanging you up on that?
So I don't think the Big 12 gets multiple teams in. I think the ACC's got a shot at it, especially the way Miami's playing right now. Man, if we end up with an ACC championship game that's Miami versus Clemson, that's going to be so highly regarded. Depending on who loses that, are they going to leave one of those teams out? And then look at the way the SEC's playing itself out. Like, I don't think Tennessee's playing great football right now, for sure. They played really well at the beginning of the year. They've fallen off a little bit. But I have a hard time if you just look at the math of the SEC, not finding – because remember, we keep talking about a 12-team playoff. For Notre Dame, this isn't. They have to – because they're not a part of a conference. The top 5 are gone out of this. So it becomes the other 7. And it's really easy to get to – Ohio State, let's say Texas, Georgia, Tennessee. Let's see what happens with Bama. Let's see what happens with Miami if they lose to Clemson in an epic game. Like, I think the numbers game could keep Notre Dame out of this, even if they win out.
I think
I
it's
disagree
certainly
completely.
I'm going to give the really unsexy sports talk answer, which is I don't know, and that's why the first committee's rankings are so important, because we don't have hard and fast rules for the 12-team playoff yet that are easy to predict. I don't know what they're going to value, and so Notre Dame's going to find out a lot. This is part of the risk they take in continuing to maintain independence as the structure of the sport changes, and they've got to see how that plays out in real time. It's why I've always said to people, would Notre Dame just forsake joining a conference forever because they can afford to with the TV money? And I said, no, they're going to look and see as long as they've got access to the dance that's realistic and evaluate that on a year-to-year basis while this changes pretty rapidly. So, Jason, I want to get to one more thing with you here. We haven't talked about the Big Ten yet. We mentioned the Big 12 briefly, and we can get to that if there's time. But the Big Ten's got one of their most important games coming up this weekend in Ohio State and Penn State. Now, Penn State wondering if they're going to have Drew Aller, their quarterback, who had to miss the back half of this last weekend's game. And Ohio State on the other side, Fitz, survived a scare against Nebraska this last weekend. Is that as easy as, hey, it was a look-ahead game for Ohio State and we can sort of wipe that away? Or do you have legitimate concerns about the Buckeyes going into this one?
I don't think I have legitimate concerns. I think it's a trap game, especially coming off of Nebraska getting their butts just handed to them, right? So I think everybody sort of underestimated Nebraska. But, Mike, I don't know, because one important thing here is Drew Aller went out for Penn State. His backup came in and looked really good. And we've talked a lot about the fact the new offensive coordinator, new system for Penn State, they're pushing the ball further down the field. Their backup looked like he came in and had absolute control of that system. So even without Drew Aller, I think that Penn State, based on that one half, I know it's one half that's dangerous. I think Penn State can handle this. So it gets really interesting to me because Will Howard, I heard him chirping about, Penn State didn't want me. I love all of that, Mike, but there is an element of me that thinks that Penn State, even without Drew Aller, can come out and put up a fight that we're not expecting. This is going to be a hell of a game. And frankly, if you're Ohio State, your back's up against the wall. You have to win this game. You go to 2 losses. Now, all of a sudden, you no longer control any. You go to 2 losses, you're not going to be in the Big Ten championship game. You have no control of what your future looks like. So I think there's a ton of pressure in this matchup.
I think Ohio State could be a 2-loss team that could make it in. If they lost to Penn State, think of their 2 losses. It would be to number 1 Oregon and number 3 Penn State. That would be the best 2-loss, resume there is. So I still think they would have a good shot to get in.
It would be interesting because right now I think you could flip that around and say, who are their big marquee wins against either, if not for those 2 teams on the schedule? They got chirped by some of the Michigan crowd for doing the Michigan and scheduling nobody early season out of conference so that they could get to conference play and feel good about this fit. So at the other side, it would be tough to find a marquee win then to probably point to for that team.
Yeah, that's the hard part. And this is what we're going to have to figure out for the Big Ten, for the SEC, for everybody. Would you rather get to the title game for your conference and lose, or would you rather not get to the title game and just leave it in the – because I get the win secures everything. But, man, you get into these title games, you take that second loss, that's going to be wildly detrimental for some of these teams.
Yeah.
And as we know, conference championship weekend, the only weekend where the entire college football playoff committee is actually watching games together. And I've always said that human element in that room of watching a team potentially get tagged real bad on that last sample size can go a long way in how some of these discussions are influenced. Check out the Yahoo Sports College Football Power Hour at Jason Fitz on Twitter is where you can follow him. Fitzy, always appreciate it, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you, boys.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here. And with all the talk about getting into playoff position, the Heisman race is also taking shape here. So we discussed the names that we expect to see in New York, the ones we've been talking about all year. Gabriel, Ward, Hunter, Genty. But Deion Sanders is wondering why Shedeur isn't getting a little more buzz.
But tonight was one of those nights. And, I mean, shoot, that's what we expect. He's so darn good that we don't give him the credit that he deserves for some of the things that he does.
Coach, he started 15-15 school record.
Wow. See, you don't even know that stuff because you're into the game and you're coaching. You don't even think about that kind of stuff. I remember, I think he did that one time in Jackson, that he was phenomenal like that. But wow. 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 And they don't even mention him for the Heisman? He's not even mentioned? Oh, my bad. He's my son. That's why.
He's not even mentioned, and Deion seems to think it's because he's his son. Do you guys agree? Should he be getting more buzz, or do you think he's firmly where he should be in the conversation, which is not really?
Dad, I actually think Deion's got a point in this. Now, the thing he was oohing and awing at was that Shedeur Sanders started the game against Cincinnati in a win, 15 for 15 passing, the most passes without an incompletion to start a game in program history as he was coming back and getting over the flu. So that was the stat he was oohing and awing at. And Dad, when you look overall at the statistical profile, and I can give you his numbers compared to some of the quarterbacks that are above him in the Heisman race right now, as far as importance to his team, when you watch this team, there are maybe 1-2 other quarterbacks that are even close to being in that conversation in terms of most valuable if we make that a part of how we handicap the Heisman race. So what was your thought on this? I saw you kind of itching towards the mic.
Well, I mean, listen, the old thing of how they do when you take them off the team. Take Dillon Gabriel off Oregon. They're not as good. Take Cam Ward off of Miami. They're not as good. Take Shedeur Sanders off of Colorado. They're not as good. So I never bought into that argument. You take anybody who is up for an award off their team, that team is not going to be as good.
Well, but, Dad, I mean, at least for the case of Oregon, you can look at them as recently as last year, and you had another quarterback who was in there where the offense performed better in almost every statistical category. So it's not without some precedent there. And while we haven't seen that yet for Colorado in a world without Shedeur Sanders, and you could say the same thing a little bit for Miami, who we've seen without Cam Ward at quarterback there. I think just eye testing the two of those teams, what Cam Ward does for Miami, what Shedeur Sanders does for Colorado, those teams are much more reliant on those guys than some of those other programs that have more weapons in certain spots.
I agree. But still, up to my point, you take them off the team, they're not as good a team. But Shedeur Sanders, now I think he will start to enter the conversation because the team has entered the rankings. The team is playing better than we thought. I mean, your Heisman favorites now are what? Gabriel, Ward, Genty, and Travis Hunter, correct?
Yeah, the top order of this and where Shedeur fits in. Dillon Gabriel's the odds-on favorite at plus 260, followed closely by Cam Ward at plus 270, and then Travis Hunter has actually overtaken Ashton Genty right now. Travis Hunter third in the odds at plus 330, Genty at plus 400. Ashton Genty coming off a win against UNLV where he only rushed for 128 yards in a game where everybody knows that he's the primary weapon. So a little bit of a head scratcher, but kind of what we predicted could happen there. And then, Dad, this is where it gets interesting to me and where Deion has a point. Cade Klubnik and Carson Beck both ahead of Shedeur Sanders right now. And I need you to point to me a single game, maybe outside of the 1/2 against Alabama for Carson Beck, where either of those quarterbacks has played better football than Shedeur Sanders over the course of this season.
I completely agree. And that's where the ranking of the team, it's a quarterback on a good team or a high-ranked team that usually gets the love. And that's one of the reasons I dislike this award so much. But because Shedeur Sanders, I think is going to start to, as this team continues, if they continue to win, The quarterback to win the award needs to be a high-ranked team and some stellar numbers, obviously, right? And Shedeur Sanders is 6th in yards, 3rd in touchdowns, 4th in completion percentage, 11th in rating. So he's near the top. And I think that those numbers can get better. Travis Hunter is there because he's an anomaly, playing both ways. And Genty was on pace to pass Barry Sanders. Now that has slowed a little bit, but the other two quarterbacks, Gabriel and Ward, are part of two highly ranked, undefeated teams. And I know that goes into the equation. You're one of the voters. You vote your conscience on how you vote. But I think Shedeur Sanders will, if they continue to win and he continues to have good stats, will jump in to this. I just think it has taken a while because he's a quarterback on a 2-loss team that is just into the rankings for the first time this year.
I have been amazed that it has taken this long for Colorado to enter the chat in terms of national conversation after what we saw from last year. They are now bowl eligible, which we said would be a major milestone for them this season, and is bowl eligible for the first time playing a full season because it happened in 2020 in the pandemic, but for the first time since 2016 in year 2 for Deion Sanders. To make that kind of jump after what we saw last year is incredible and deserves praise. And yet, for some reason, Dad, has been met with none of the same energy as it was last year. In a year where we talked about, we graduated a number of stars in the sport. We're looking around for quarterbacks to take up the mantle after a first round that had 6 of them this last season, and another who started NFL games in Spencer Rattler that was a 5th rounder. And yet, Deion Sanders and Colorado have gone out and accomplished this season, are now ranked in the top 25. And I get it, in the Big 12, they took a hit. If they had beaten Kansas State in a late-night game that very few people probably saw, I'd imagine this would have been expedited a little bit. But, Dad, they've been a far more serious contender than they ever were last year. In my mind, this just goes to, especially with the way college football operates, where you get a start before the NFL gets going. That season gets ramped up a little bit before the NFL gets into the full swing, and now we've got playoff baseball on top of that. We had the WNBA finals. You've got the sports equinox that starts to take up more of the airspace. I think with our attention span, a lot of the college football storylines get developed early in the season while the out-of-conference matchups are going on, when we get those crossovers. And when Colorado lost in the fashion that they did to Nebraska, I think a lot of people did what we did to Clemson after they lost to Georgia, and what some of these other teams with early season losses saw. Even Notre Dame, to an extent, after the Northern Illinois game, was sort of pushed off to the side for a while. They're starting to work their way back into the conversation. And I have to imagine, given our appetite for all things Colorado, that it won't be hard for that to come by now, especially because this was, I think, very pointed by Deion Sanders, Dad. Like, him saying this, whether or not he actually believes it to be true, and I do think there's probably a part of him that says Shedeur's being punished for what Deion has said and done in the media in his mind. I do think him saying this is going to do what it's doing right here. It ignites a conversation that's actually worth having and starts to get this going in the media cycle that's going to have us talking about Shedeur Sanders come this weekend. I'm sure College Game Day is going to have some sort of Shedeur Sanders Heisman conversation when we kick off this weekend.
Yeah, I agree. Deion Sanders brought it into the conversation, and the conversation will continue to be like oh yeah, Shedeur is putting up some good numbers. From a team standpoint, they finished with Texas Tech, Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State. So they're and I'll be interested. So it'll be one more game. It'll be Texas Tech. No, actually, they have a bye, so their schedule or their record is what it is before the first committee ranking comes out. And I'd imagine they'll be low like they are in the AP ranking. They'll be ranked, but they'll be ranked low without a lot of room to move up with the teams I mentioned they're playing left on the schedule, because they're going to start low. They're not going to have room to move up, and I think that's going to hurt Shedeur. Because as I said, I completely agree with, and I think it's proven that the quarterback position when they win the Heisman is on a good team, and a quarterback puts up stellar numbers. And do not be a non-quarterback to win. You have to be to do something amazing, which Genty was on pace to break Barry Sanders' record. At Travis Hunter, nobody else is playing over 100 plays a game, and can he keep up that for another 4 or 5 games? Can Travis do that? That's a hard ask to do. That could be the hardest ask of any of the Heisman favorites to do. the quarterbacks to continue to play well, Genty to continue to run well, or Travis Hunter continue to play 100, 110, 120 plays a game. He has the hardest job without question.
Travis Hunter currently, and this is the other part of it, is you're absolutely right. Travis Hunter takes a lot of oxygen in this conversation about the Heisman race on that Colorado team, and deservedly so, because this is not a gimmick. Like, if you haven't watched Colorado football and you've just seen some of the highlights and stuff, Travis Hunter leads Colorado in pass breakups with 7 on the season, is tied for the team lead in interceptions with 2 on the season, is the leading receiver in terms of yards on this team by over 250 yards next to the next closest receiver, is the leader in touchdown receptions with 8 on this team as well. He does everything at an incredibly high level. There's part of me that does think, given the value of wide receiver in the NFL right now, that may actually be the more viable path for him, because you look at the way that he moves at that position and what he affords them on an offense that, quite honestly, like LeJounte Wester's really good there. Jimmy Horn Jr., when you turn on the tape, moves with a different gear.
Right.
They've got a scary group of offensive skill players. Their offensive line is moved to competent now. Last year, it was 5 guys going out there and playing on islands. This year, they're actually playing together a little bit more. Like, Dad, this was a team last year that had special players but did not play as a team. They were going out there and there were individuals that could perform well. They still have those individuals capable of that, but you're seeing a lot more full team commitment on the football field from this group that makes them really interesting down the stretch. As you mentioned, with their schedule, the Big 12, nothing feels guaranteed, as we've seen Iowa State fly close to the sun recently. BYU could be putting themselves in position coming off a weekend where everyone doubted them against UCF. The line had swung in UCF's favor. Everyone's picking against them, and BYU went out there and put it on them. They might be able to create some separation, but this is a conference that we said at the start of the season felt wide open and still feels that way to some extent now, and so you could still talk about them being potentially in the mix with some chaos down the stretch of this season, but at the very least, I do think these guys are going to be involved in the award. That being said, Dad, if Cam Ward keeps up the way that he's been playing on a Miami team that has this trajectory solely because of him, I do feel like it's going to be hard to pry that trophy out of his fingers when it's all said and done.
Yep, I completely agree. I completely agree that he, I know Dylan Gabriel's a favorite. I think Cam Ward he would eventually win this. His stats are better than Dylan Gabriel, by some, not an eye-popping amount, but enough to separate if Miami were to go undefeated and stay in the top 5.
I just also think part of the Cam Ward experience is, again, rule of cool. You go and watch Dylan Gabriel play. He's a great player, throws a really nice deep ball that they're starting to explore more, is a great point guard in Will Stein's offense, but also goes and looks like he's playing it by the books. Cam Ward looks like he's drawing that in the dirt. And he's always been a guy who's been such a unique player, going all the way back to even his time before Washington State at Incarnate Word, but this is a guy now doing it on these big stages, going out there and trying to play the position as if he is trying to embarrass the opposition by how easy this is for him and how nonchalant all of this is.
Yeah, and they again, as I mentioned when we talked about the ACC, they don't play any of the other undefeateds in the ACC, so their schedule is favorable, though they have made it a little harder on themselves with some of their defensive play. So then they would go into the championship game, and then the Heisman's after that, correct? The championship games are involved in the Heisman race, so that would be the cherry on top. If he were to run the table, as I think it'll be Clemson in the ACC title game, 2 highly ranked teams at that point, I think the award, quite honestly, is Cam Ward's to lose.
So that, another thing to keep an eye on as we get down the home stretch in college football season. Deion Sanders went out and got I think he's going to get exactly what he wanted out of these comments this week, which is understanding how to play the media game as well as anyone. And again, in a lot of cases, listen, we've had disagreements with things that Deion has said and done publicly, both in how he's run the program, what he said in terms of things to media members. But in this case, I actually agree with him in that Shedeur Sanders should be a lot more involved in this conversation. Right. And quite honestly, I talked to Jessica Smetana Montana about this yesterday, is already starting to get some of this love from evaluators for the next level in the NFL. And while the Heisman's great, that one far more important to the bottom line, even if that Heisman trophy can get you involved in a bunch of fun Heisman House ads that I'd imagine also pay well. Coming up next, let's head to the hardwood last night. An unlikely MVP candidate maybe emerging early in the NBA season. How's that for a week one headline? Next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We got some rough news for the Warriors. So Steph Curry hurt his ankle in the third quarter of the game on Sunday. He returned to the game in the fourth, but then twisted the same ankle. Not great. Reports are he's going to miss at least 2 games and be reevaluated on Friday, guys. So obviously not great for them. We can only hope that we get some positive results from those tests.
Yep, obviously, Dad, knowing that ankle injuries were a huge part of Steph Curry's story early in his career, you always wince a little bit when it goes back to that. And while this Golden State team kind of going a new direction philosophically, we know with Klay Thompson no longer there, and Steve Kerr basically committing to playing 12 deep right now in their lineup, going with these massive platoon units, it all only works if Steph Curry's there to make it work. You know, you've got a lot of guys that stepped up for you as young players last year, but none of this goes anywhere that people believe. We talked to Amin El-Hassan on this show, one of the co-hosts of Oddball and our NBA analyst here, who said he thinks Golden State can be a playoff team. This is something you want to monitor because you don't want this to be a trend with Steph Curry. Let him rest, get through this, and focus on the long haul.
I was surprised to hear that he thought Golden State would be in the mix for the playoffs. I thought it would be a step back for them. But, yeah, listen, it's always better to be hurt early than hurt late. Especially if you do make it into the postseason. Now you just have to give this thing a chance to rest. But rest it all you want. He's had, as you mentioned, ankle injuries before, so you just wonder when it pops up again. But now you just got to sit him and make sure this thing is healed up.
Yep, absolutely. So hopefully that doesn't become an issue because, again, it would be I don't know. This is a big turning of the page for Golden State in a lot of ways. And we've tried to write the last page of this dynasty and this era in basketball for a while.
Yeah.
And they've constantly surprised us. And so I want to keep my eye on this team. Maybe it's the person looking for nostalgia in me, as we just saw him and Kevin Durant and LeBron win us a gold medal, to believe that they might be capable of that same magic still when it comes to the NBA season. Speaking of magic, though, Jesse, let's get to a little bit of pick and prop here. Last night, someone in a Magic uniform decided to insert himself in the conversation that he was a part of at the end of last year pretty powerfully.
Yeah, so this NBA season, guys, DraftKings is your home for player props, and we're giving away $10 million in bonus bets to start the NBA season. All customers get a daily NBA player prop profit boost for the first 10 days of the NBA season. Place your daily NBA profit boost token on a pregame player prop bet for a player of your choice. If that player is the leader in points and rebounds and assists combined that night, they are deemed the king of the court, and you win a share of $1 million paid out in bonus bets. So check it all out on the DraftKings Sportsbook app. And Paulo Banchero with a massive night. He was king of the court, 72 points, rebounds, and assists. So is Orlando the team to look out for, guys? And every time I see Paulo Banchero's name, I just think of the Lizzie McGuire movie, Sing to Me, Paulo. So just had to get that in. Sing to me, Paulo.
I think of the Martin, was it Martin Brindle, the guy that does the pre-race interviews for Formula One, confusing Paulo Banchero for Patrick Mahomes on the racetrack out there. So that'll be my word association forever. But Dad, this is a guy I think a lot of people, was a big name even when he was in college, but last year, based on what he was able to help elevate the Magic to in terms of the postseason, registered a lot more on the Richter scale. And now coming off that game last night where he had 37 in the first half, for reference, all of the starters for the opposing team had 37 points in the first half of that win. So a big night for him, Dad. And I don't know, just interesting to keep an eye on. He's a guy that skill set wise, I forget who it was last year, kind of said, and this is not to say they are the same players, but meaning his size, the way that he moves, all of those things, a little bit LeBron James-esque because of his stature, makes him a really interesting player to watch on a Magic team that could take another big step forward this season.
Well, I mean, listen, we talked in the East. Obviously, Boston is at the top, but we talked, do the Knicks make a run at them? The 76ers with the Paul George pickup, though, they're dealing with injuries. In Milwaukee, could the band of three actually play together without someone missing with injury? And then we always said, would it be Cleveland or Orlando that could crash the party and make a deep run into the playoffs? Cleveland's 4-0. Darius Garland had, 37 or 34 last night in their win over the Knicks. The Knicks are 1-2. Again, it's early. It's ridiculous to read records at this point, but I'll do it anyway because it's my Cleveland Cavaliers. They're sitting at 4-0. Boston's 4-0. Orlando's 3-1. So that was the thought to me: Cleveland or Orlando or both. Upsetting the apple cart and making a jump over the others that we normally talk about at the top of the East.
It's certainly a possibility, and especially if they can go and get performances like this anywhere close to somewhat regularly. Now, he said, it's like shooting in the gym in that first half. How often you get that in the NBA remains to be seen. It's early. He's young. These kind of things might happen. But if we're going to talk about pick and prop, Dad, Jesse mentioned King of the Court that's up on DraftKings right now. We got a few games tonight that could potentially fall in this range if we want to make a pick here. You've got Nikola Jokic and the the Denver Nuggets facing the Nets. You've got Luka Doncic facing the Timberwolves and Anthony Edwards on that other side facing the Mavs, all of which could be in this range. If we're going to go totals for the things that we talked about for this, it's hard to look away from Nikola Jokic. Had 40 points against the Raptors the other night. Is always a guy that could stuff the stat sheet in the way that helps you win this. So I would probably say Joker versus the Nets would be where I'd look if I was trying to get this one.
I would agree, and a lot of people, not a lot of people, but it's early, wondering about the Nuggets. In a deep Western Conference, are the Nuggets going to be, big-time players in it? Oklahoma City sitting here undefeated. And we keep talking about Wembanyama as a Defensive Player of the Year. Enter Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren leads the league in blocks at 4 a game. He's he's actually tied for second in rebounds, defensive rebounds per game. So Chet's getting it done. Oklahoma City's getting it done right now. But as far as that bet, I would look to Joker to do it, and let's see what Denver can do.
I will say Chet Holmgren has come out with his hair on fire. He was the only one. He was the second in the odds for Defensive Player of the Year, although it was a massive gulf between him and Victor Wembanyama. As we said, that award almost handed to Victor before the season even started there. And then, interesting, Dad, I mean, the Celtics are 4-0. We saw them on opening night just obliterate the competition in the New York Knicks. And I saw Nick Wright the other day author the take that the Boston Celtics are kind of at the forefront of a conversation about the styles in the NBA that he would like to see changed, where it's become way too reliant on three-point shooting, that in light of the Celtics' success, you're going to see more teams continue to follow a model that we know has been in place since James Harden and Steph Curry started shooting. Because he says, Dad, it makes the product worse overall when you just have teams chucking up threes in lieu of anything else. You're someone who's, consumed a lot more old school basketball than I did in your lifetime here. Is there any merit to that, you think, as we continue to get further down the road of the Celtics maybe as the zenith of this 3-and-nothing else style of offense that won them a championship?
I mean, I personally, as a fan and a watcher of the NBA, don't just like the chucking up of threes, but if analytics goes that way, and again, I'm analytics was going on long before the talk of analytics now. It was just different terms back in the day, even when I played, and before I played, there were analytics. So, but analytics talks about threes. I particularly don't just like the chucking up of threes. I like seeing plays on the inside as well. The big fives matching up anymore, I know we're not going to get. So it's like, why complain? It's where it's going. I can complain all I want. It doesn't matter. It's going to be the way of the threes because analytics says so. So I get it. You just have to take it into consideration. But then again, you have someone like Anthony Davis, who is playing some great inside ball right now. Averaging 32 points a game, leading the league for the Lakers, who lost their first game to the Suns. I think both teams are 3-1. You do have some good inside play with AD.
It's sort of why I always pull back a little bit from these conversations that want to overreact too strongly, because in sports, you've got finite resources. Not every team can field a roster that is as capable of scoring from beyond the arc as teams like the prime Golden State Warriors, as this current Boston Celtics team. We've got a lot of quality big men that have developed different skill sets. We've got rosters distributed differently across the league, and so you're going to always have to get creative in how you approach winning in this game, knowing that the resources in the space are finite on these rosters. All right, let's finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, Xumo Play, Vizio Watch Free Plus, all those good places at the good time. If you have to miss us on the good places or at the good time, you can check us out wherever you get our podcast, including our great guests. Shout out to Yahoo Sports' Jason Fitz for stopping by, talking some NFL and college football with us. If you missed that, check it out where you get the pod or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show here live. Guys, let's start off with this. We mentioned the Boston Celtics are off to a 4-0 start in defense of their championship. And you could say it's because of their dedication on and off the court. Ball is life for this Celtics squad, and that extends to Peyton Pritchard, who we've often said is the most emblematic of the Boston Celtics fan base. His wife posted this video on Instagram of even Peyton Pritchard during his off day finding his way out onto the basketball court and still getting some time in with some of the local kids out there. Pretty wholesome moment. This is very Ted Lasso-esque for me when you see him playing soccer in the park with the little girl on his way to the pitch, Dad. This is just a guy who loves the game and giving this kid a cool moment that I'm sure they'll remember forever.
Yeah, they were out walking the dog. Him and his wife were walking the dog, and he ends up hooping. And you're right, with a kid. And you're right, that kid, what a memory for that kid playing with a Boston Celtic. Pritchard, by the way, scored 28 points off the bench in last night's win, 8 of 12 from 3. So he didn't take a 3 against that kid. He kind of backed the kid down a little bit, quite honestly, because in the rare instance he has a size advantage on the court to back someone down into the paint.
I was going to say, it's one of those moments where you remember NBA players are making the best of what's around them when they're on the court in the NBA. Yeah. Like Peyton Pritchard was probably the best player on so many basketball courts in his whole life, and now he plays with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and so he knows that's not the life he lives. But he caught this kid and saw a mismatch and said, mouse in the house, baby. I'm going to back him down on the block. So cool moment for him, cool moment for the kid.
I'm surprised he didn't give him the short sign, after he made the bucket, put the heck. Could you imagine?
I think he missed the
I was
bucket.
kind of waiting for them because we talk about all these camp videos where players have to make the decision of are they going to treat these campers and little kids with a healthy fear because they don't want to get embarrassed and get put online, or are they going to go too far the other way? And Jesse, I was fully prepared for what Dad said, for this cute, wholesome video to all of a sudden take a turn when he turned around and yammed on the kid or something.
Yeah, but I'm just laughing because he missed the shot, I think.
No, it went in.
It went in?
Oh, no, it went in. Yeah, it went in.
It bounced around a little bit and went in. So he did in fact make the bucket, because that would have been a tough look too.
Honestly, it probably would have. But amazing stuff. I love it. Maybe little kids are going to be going and hanging out at that park now in the hopes that Peyton Pritchard shows up.
That's true.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe that
That's
little
true.
kid will grow up to be an NBA player, and we'll have this video to look back on and all of a sudden recollect on. Jesse, speaking of kids growing up to make us all feel old, let's get to that here as we've got that now for the Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah, so we talked about the U being back, and now they're getting some commits from some of the families that helped put it on the map originally. So Clinton Portis' son, Camden, 3-star corner, has committed to the Hurricanes. You guys know Notre Dame has a lot of Stars kids, former Stars kids right now, and in the past, you guys did that, and Miami's looking to get in on the Bloodlines game as well.
This is absolutely ridiculous. So Camden Portis is a 6-foot, 165-pound defensive back prospect from Charlotte. So obviously playing a different position than his father did, like a lot of the stars that we've seen go through this. But Dad, this just sort of a reminder, the passage of time comes for us all, and I now know how you felt on a regular basis watching your former teammates' kids come up through the ranks at the same time that me and Jake and Sydney all did. But also, and I don't know how you feel about that, this does give me a chance to do my favorite thing. We used to do this all the time in college when we were in the locker room, is to go back and look at the 2001 Miami Hurricanes roster that might be the best roster in the history of the sport.
I mean, you're right. I mean, first, congrats to Camden. Again, he had other offers, and he chose, he still has another year in high school. It's for the 2026 class. their father, Clinton Portis, was part of that 2001 team, went on to play, I think, 9 years in the NFL, won a national championship, 2-time NFL Pro Bowler. So that's cool. I mean, I had cool moments when you, Jake, and Sydney all signed with Notre Dame. It was a very, very cool moment. I imagine it has to be a great moment for Clinton Portis and the other dads out there who see their sons follow in the footsteps, sometimes go to the school they went to, whether it's going to the same school or not. If it's a kid fulfilling his dream, it doesn't matter what school they go to. But when you go to the same school, it is pretty cool. But that you're right. That 2001 roster for the Hurricanes was ridiculous.
It is funny, and it shows you the different times everyone has kids. Clinton Portis was a junior on that 01 Hurricane squad. Frank Gore was a freshman, and Frank Gore's already got a son that's in the NFL right now who's gone through the college ranks. We did this with him. But just in case anyone ever forgot, because I have such a vivid memory, we were getting ready to play Michigan. It was Notre Dame at Michigan. College game day was in town, and so Kirk Herbstreit was calling the game and was out at practice. And my buddy Trevor Robinson had grown up in Nebraska, huge Cornhusker fan as a kid. And he shouted out at Herbie, who was walking through the stretch line at our practice. He goes, "Herbie, greatest team of all time, 95 Huskers of the 01 Hurricanes." And Herbie kind of hemmed and hawed and joked with him, and then ultimately landed on the Hurricanes, and you see why here. Ken Dorsey at quarterback, the running back room, Clinton Portis, Najee Davenport, who also played in the NFL, but then Willis McGahee and Frank Gore, both freshmen getting touches on that team, as well as Jarrett Payton, who is a running back on that group, Andre Johnson at wide receiver, Jeremy Shockey and Kellen Winslow at tight end for this team, Bryant McKinney on the offensive line, and then Andrew Williams, William Joseph, Jerome McDougie, Matt Walters, Vince Wilfork, Jonathan Vilma, DJ Williams, Ed Reed, and Antrell Roll in that defensive backfield room. It is like the guys on the practice squad running show team on that team, going on to be future NFL Hall of Famers, will never not make me smile.
Could you imagine if the transfer portal was as big then, how many of those guys may have left because of the players in front of them? I mean, they all turned out to be stars. They waited their turn, and they ended up being stars in their own right and going on to NFL careers. But if it was today's world, how many of them maybe would have gone because they would have easily played somewhere else, right? I mean, they could have easily, while they were waiting their turn, probably could have played somewhere else.
That running back room's a perfect example. We talk about this. Clinton Portis was the leading rusher on that team, 22 carries for 1,200 yards. Frank Gore, as a freshman, had 62 carries and averaged 9.1 yards per carry for over 560 yards on the season. Like, it was an embarrassment of riches with that squad, and it's no wonder they get battered around as one of the best teams of all time. Jesse, let's get to the third. It is Halloween time. We're on the lookout for costumes that, will ruin people's lives forever based on the poor decisions they make, but also definitely hit the clever button here, and that might have happened for a former Patriot spouse.
Yes, so Linda Holliday, former long-term girlfriend of Bill Belichick, went out with the girls on Saturday night, and she was dressed as Uma Thurman from the Kill Bill series, which, oh, brother, Bill's out there now dating a 24-year-old, and she decides this is the Halloween to go as a character from Kill Bill. The insinuation is clear.
Yeah, it's not subtle. This is not a subtle costume at all, right? Nope. Pretty detailed.
Yeah, no, subtle as a sledgehammer, this one, hitting it right on the nose here. And shout out to her girlfriends that she was out with there, because they were gassing her up all week for this. I don't know who got the honor of posting this one to social media, but they had to be thrilled because, listen, while it is their lives and they can do whatever they want, and I'm not going to sit here and put numbers on an age is just a number thing on love for Bill Belichick and whatever he wants to do. But I cannot imagine what those women's group chat has looked like over the last number of months culminating in this costume. It has to be some of the most hateful things on planet Earth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then to throw in Tom Brady's ex, Gisele Bündchen, she's pregnant with her first child with the gym and the trainer, right?
Jiu-jitsu instructor. Yes.
Jiu-jitsu instructor. Yeah, I'm not going to mess that up. Jiu-jitsu. I'll get.
Yes.
So yeah, not a great media day for the quarterback or coach of the Patriots.
Not great.
Great media day for us, though, here, and costumes that won't get anybody in trouble coming later this week. Download, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave it a 5-star rating. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.